Most species fear death. Humans are born on it. The city never slept, but tonight it breathed in a low, electric hum, neon reflections sliding across rain-slick streets as acid droplets tapped rhythmically against the armored windshield, each impact hissing softly before dissolving into harmless vapor. Inside the vehicle, the air was sterile, filtered, quiet. Too quiet for the tension building in the back seat, where Senator Varexia lounged with calculated elegance, her luminous blue skin catching the passing lights like polished glass, her golden eyes fixed not on the skyline, but on the man in front of her. Ethan Cole didn't turn around, didn't acknowledge the weight of her gaze, his hands steady on the wheel, gloved fingers resting with mechanical precision as the dashboard pulsed with soft indicators. Speed, 42 miles per hour, cabin pressure stable, route deviation pending. You drive like you're afraid of something, she said at last, her voice smooth, edged with something colder than the rain outside. Ethan's eyes flicked, once to the side mirror, then back to the road. I drive like I'm aware of everything, he replied, voice low, even, the kind that didn't need volume to carry weight. A pause followed, thick and deliberate, before she leaned forward slightly, studying the back of his head, the faint scar just above his collar line barely visible beneath the dim cabin lights. Your kind was barely admitted into the council, she continued, almost idly, as if stating a fact beneath her notice, and yet they trust you with proximity to power. Curious decision. Ethan didn't respond this time, and something about that silence irritated her more than any argument could. Outside, the skyline shifted, towers thinning, the glow of the central district fading into darker, quieter corridors of the city where traffic was sparse and signals weaker. Varexia's eyes narrowed slightly. This is not the approved route, she said, sharper now. Ethan's thumb tapped once against the steering column, rerouting locked in. No, it's not, he said. Then correct it, she snapped. A command, not a request. For the first time, Ethan spoke without looking at her. Stay seated. And there was something in those two words, not defiance, not fear, just certainty, that made the air feel different, heavier. The car's internal system chimed softly as external sensors flickered, something moving just beyond visible range, too fast for civilian tracking, too deliberate to be random. Varexia felt it then, not through instruments, but instinct, a shift, a pattern breaking. What did you do? She demanded. But Ethan was already adjusting the vehicle's trajectory, guiding it off the main grid, deeper into shadow where the city's hum faded into something quieter, something waiting. His breathing didn't change, his grip didn't tighten, but the car itself seemed to respond to him, systems aligning, locking, preparing. And for the first time since she had entered the vehicle, Senator Varexia realized something unsettling. She was no longer the one in control. The vehicle's hum lowered to a near whisper as it slipped deeper into the dim grid, the towering lights of the central district now distant reflections in the rearview mirror. And for a brief moment, there was only the soft hiss of acid rain and the steady rhythm of regulated air cycling through the cabin. Senator Varexia leaned back slowly, her posture still composed, but her eyes sharper now, tracking every micro-movement in Ethan Cole's shoulders, the subtle shifts of his hands, the way his gaze never lingered yet never missed anything. You are deviating from authorized protocol, she said, her voice measured, reclaiming control through tone alone. But Ethan did not respond immediately. His focus locked ahead as the navigation display flickered with recalculations that did not belong to civilian software. Protocol assumes predictable variables, he said after a second, calm, almost quiet. This is not one of them. Outside, something moved again, not visible in full, just a distortion in the rain pattern, droplets bending around an unseen shape, the car's sensors attempting to resolve it, and failing in small, rapid pulses. Varexia noticed the fluctuation, her fingers tightening slightly against the armrest, though she did not allow it to show in her voice. Then explain, she demanded. What exactly is happening? Ethan exhaled once, slow, controlled, as if measuring time in breaths rather than seconds. We are being observed, he said, and the observation is closing distance. The words settled into the cabin like weight, and for the first time since entering the vehicle, Varexia did not have an immediate reply. She glanced toward the side panel where external feeds should have displayed clear surroundings. But instead there were brief distortions, shadows that did not align with any registered structure, gaps where the system refused to define shape. "Your system is malfunctioning," she said, though the certainty in her voice had thinned. Ethan shook his head slightly. "No, Senator, it is functioning exactly as designed. It is refusing to guess." A soft tone chimed as he engaged another layer of controls, ones not marked by standard interface icons, and the interior lights dimmed just a fraction, enough to shift the reflection on the glass, enough to reveal movement that had been hidden by glare. Something was pacing them, matching speed, staying just beyond clear detection. Varexia felt it then, not fear, not yet, but a disruption of expectation, the precise structure of her world bending in ways she had not permitted. "Stop the vehicle," she said again, quieter this time. Not a command, but an attempt to re-establish order. Ethan's answer was immediate. No, and there was no defiance in it. No challenge, just a simple boundary that did not invite negotiation. The car accelerated slightly, climbing from 42 to 50 miles per hour, tires gripping the slick surface with controlled precision as they approached a narrower corridor between structures where signal interference thickened. "You overstep your role," she said, but the words lacked their earlier force. Ethan finally glanced into the mirror, meeting her eyes for less than a second, long enough for her to see something there that did not belong to a hired driver, something steady, unshaken, and entirely unconcerned with her status. "My role," he said, turning his attention forward again, "is to get you to the end of this route alive." Outside, the distortion shifted closer, and the system tone rose a fraction in pitch. Not an alarm. Not yet, just a warning building toward one. And inside the vehicle, the silence returned, heavier now, carrying a realization that neither of them spoke aloud. Whatever was following them had already decided this route was not optional. The tone inside the cabin shifted before the system could name it. A subtle vibration through the frame, like the vehicle itself had started to listen. Ethan's fingers moved once across the console, not hurried, not uncertain, just precise, and a second layer of shielding engaged with a low hum that settled beneath the sound of the rain. Senator Varexia felt the pressure change, slight, but undeniable, her senses sharpening as the outside distortion pressed closer, no longer just bending the rain but shaping it, carving a path through falling droplets as if space itself were being negotiated rather than occupied. "That is not standard surveillance," she said, quieter now, her voice carrying less command and more calculation. Ethan nodded once, eyes forward. "No, it is not," he replied. The vehicle's speed held steady at 50 miles per hour, but the world outside seemed to slow, each reflection stretching across the glass as the corridor narrowed and signal interference climbed. The navigation display flickering between mapped reality and something less certain. "You said we were being observed," Varexia continued, her gaze fixed on the shifting shadows. "This is more than observation." Ethan's jaw tightened just slightly, the only visible sign that he agreed. "Yes," he said, "it is deciding." The word hung in the air, heavy and unresolved. A soft chime pulsed through the system. Not an alarm, but a threshold crossed, and for a fraction of a second the external feed cleared, just enough to reveal a silhouette pacing them at the edge of visibility. Too smooth to be mechanical, too consistent to be natural. Varexia's breath slowed, controlled, but her mind raced through classifications that did not fit, protocols that did not apply. "Contact Central Command," she said, reaching toward the communication panel. Ethan's hand moved first, not fast, just final. Disabling the channel with a single input. "No transmissions," he said. Her head snapped forward, eyes narrowing. "You do not have the authority to restrict a senator of the council." Ethan did not look back. Authority is not the relevant variable right now. The vehicle dipped slightly as he adjusted course again, guiding them into a lower passage where the overhead structures blocked most external signals. The rain reduced to a distant hiss above reinforced plating. Inside, the lighting dimmed further, the cabin settling into a controlled, almost isolated environment. "Explain your actions," Varexia demanded, but the edge in her voice had changed, less certain, more urgent. Ethan inhaled slowly, then spoke. Whatever is tracking us is not using standard detection. It is reading responses, mapping behavior, learning in real time. He paused, eyes flicking once to the mirror. If you transmit, it learns faster. Silence followed, thick and immediate. As the implications settled, Varexia withdrew her hand from the panel. Not in surrender, but in calculation, her mind adjusting to a framework where information itself could be a vulnerability. Then why continue moving? She asked. Why not stop? Remove the variable. Ethan's answer came without hesitation. Because it is not tracking the vehicle, he said. It is tracking you. The words landed harder than any impact, and for the first time, Senator Varexia felt something unfamiliar press against her certainty. Not fear, not yet, but the clear absence of control. Outside, the silhouette drew closer, its form sharpening for just a moment against the dim corridor lighting before dissolving again into distortion, and inside the vehicle, the system tone rose another fraction, no longer neutral, no longer passive. Ethan adjusted his grip on the wheel, steady as ever, and spoke one more time, quieter now. We are running out of space. And the corridor ahead narrowed into darkness that did not reflect the lights behind them. The darkness ahead did not behave like absence of light. It held shape, depth, intention, and as the vehicle moved closer, the sensors stopped attempting to resolve it altogether, as if the system itself had decided there was nothing it could safely define. Ethan eased his foot off the accelerator, the speed dropping from 50 to 30 miles per hour, not from hesitation, but from calculation, every movement measured against variables only he seemed to understand. Senator Varexia leaned forward slightly, her earlier authority replaced by a sharper, quieter focus. Her eyes locked on the windshield where reflections no longer matched the city behind them. You are slowing down, she said, not as a challenge, but as an observation. Ethan nodded once. It wants us to, he replied. The words landed with a weight that shifted the air again, and for the first time, she did not question him immediately. The corridor walls narrowed further, metallic structures closing in on either side until the vehicle's clearance dropped to less than a foot, the hum of the engine echoing back in controlled resonance. Outside, the rain had stopped, not because the storm had passed, but because something above them had redirected it, leaving the surface dry, untouched, unnatural. You said it is learning, Varexia said, her voice steady but lower now. What does it learn from this? Ethan's eyes tracked the subtle distortions ahead, the way the darkness seemed to adjust as they approached. It learns limits, he said. How we respond when options are removed. A soft pulse ran through the dashboard, not an alert, but a feedback loop stabilizing. And Ethan's hand hovered just above the controls without touching them, waiting. Then give it a different response, she said, a hint of her old command returning. Break the pattern. Ethan exhaled slowly, the faintest shift in his posture suggesting consideration. That is what it is expecting, he replied. Silence followed. But it was no longer empty. It carried tension, awareness, something building. The vehicle rolled forward another 10 feet, then another, until the darkness ahead resolved just enough to reveal an outline. Not fully visible, not fixed, but present. Positioned directly in their path. The system did not label it, did not classify it. It simply stopped updating that section of the display. Varexia's fingers tightened again. This time she did not hide it. We cannot proceed, she said. Ethan did not answer immediately. His gaze locked forward, his breathing steady, as if he had seen something like this before, or something worse. We are already proceeding, he said at last. The vehicle came to a controlled stop, not abrupt, not forced, just precise. Exactly 6 feet from where the distortion thickened into near solidity. The engine idled quietly, the cabin sealed, the outside world reduced to a muted, undefined presence. Now what? Varexia asked. And there was no command in it, only a question. Ethan finally moved his hand, not to accelerate, not to reverse, but to disengage a secondary lock, the soft click barely audible in the enclosed space. Now we stop giving it motion to study, he said. Another second passed, then another, the silence stretching, until something changed outside, not in shape but in distance, the presence shifting closer by an inch. Then another, testing, probing. Varexia felt it in a way that bypassed logic. Pressure against perception itself. It is coming closer, she whispered. Ethan nodded once. Yes, he said, calm as ever. And now it expects fear. He rested his hands loosely on the wheel, posture relaxed in a way that felt entirely out of place, and added quietly, we are not going to give it that either. And for the first time since the encounter began, the tension in the air did not rise. It changed direction. The silence inside the vehicle did not break. It stretched, deepened, until it became something tangible, something both of them could feel pressing against the edges of their awareness. And outside, the distortion shifted again, not forward this time but sideways, as if reconsidering its angle of approach. Ethan did not move, his hands still resting lightly on the wheel, his breathing steady, controlled, almost indifferent. And that indifference began to matter. Senator Varexia watched the space ahead with unblinking focus, her earlier certainty replaced by calculation layered over something new, something she had never needed before, adaptation. It is waiting, she said quietly. Ethan gave the smallest nod. Yes, he replied. It is trying to define us. The words settled. And she understood them differently now, not as abstraction but as immediate reality. The presence outside was not simply observing. It was comparing, measuring reactions against expectation, building a model. Then we are data, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Ethan's eyes flicked once toward the mirror, then back to the distortion. Only if we behave predictably, he said. Another second passed. Then the presence moved again, closer by inches, the air around the vehicle, bending subtly as if pressure itself were being adjusted, testing thresholds. Varexia felt her instincts push for response, for command, for control, but every protocol she knew relied on clarity, and there was none here. What does it expect now? She asked. Ethan's answer came without hesitation. Escalation, he said. Fear, panic, an attempt to flee or confront. She exhaled slowly, forcing her posture to remain composed. And if we give it neither? Ethan's fingers tapped once against the wheel, a quiet, almost absent gesture. Then it has to reassess, he said. The idea was simple, but the execution demanded something she was not accustomed to offering. Stillness without dominance, presence without control. Outside, the distortion rippled again, closer now, close enough that the outline began to stabilize at the edges, not fully visible, but enough to suggest form, something tall, something deliberate, something that did not belong to any known classification. Varexia's gaze did not waver, but her voice dropped to a near whisper. It is studying our lack of response. Ethan nodded once. Yes, he said. And it does not like uncertainty. The statement lingered, and for the first time, the advantage shifted, not in power, not in force, but in comprehension. The system inside the vehicle remained quiet. No alarms, no warnings. Only a steady baseline as if it too had chosen observation over reaction. You have done this before, she said suddenly, the realization forming as she watched him remain completely unshaken. Ethan did not answer immediately, his eyes fixed forward, but after a moment he spoke. Not this exact scenario, he said, but close enough. She studied him then, really studied him. The stillness, the restraint, the absence of visible fear, and something in her understanding began to shift. Your species, she said slowly. You are accustomed to environments that do not follow rules. Ethan's expression did not change, but his voice carried a faint edge of something deeper, something older. We are accustomed to surviving them, he said. Outside, the presence paused, its movement halting completely for the first time since it had appeared, as if the pattern it expected had failed to emerge. The air pressure stabilized, the distortion no longer advancing, no longer retreating, simply existing at a fixed distance. Varexia felt it, the moment of equilibrium, fragile but real, and she realized something that unsettled her more than the presence itself. They were no longer reacting to it. It was reacting to them. Ethan leaned back slightly in his seat, not relaxing, but settling into the moment with quiet certainty, and said, almost under his breath, now it has to decide what we are. And outside, the distortion shifted again, not closer this time, but slower, more deliberate, as if whatever watched them had just encountered something it could not easily categorize. The presence outside did not advance, but it did not retreat either, and that stillness carried a different kind of weight, one that pressed against the boundaries of expectation rather than force. Ethan remained motionless, his posture unchanged, his hands resting loosely as if the outcome no longer depended on movement. And that choice began to shape the moment more than anything else. Senator Varexia felt it clearly now. The shift in control had not come from strength or authority. It had come from refusal, a refusal to behave as predicted. "It is hesitating," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might disrupt whatever balance had formed. Ethan nodded once. "Yes," he replied, "because we are not fitting the model it is building." Outside, the distortion softened at its edges, not disappearing but loosening, like a structure losing certainty in its own form. And for a brief second the outline became almost visible. Tall, elongated, its shape defined more by absence than presence. Varexia's gaze sharpened, her mind reaching for classification again, for hierarchy, for something she could place above or below herself, but nothing aligned. "Then we define ourselves," she said quietly, more to test the idea than to assert it. Ethan's expression did not change, but there was a subtle shift in his breathing, a measured inhale, a controlled exhale, as if he was considering the weight of that statement. "Careful," he said, "definition gives it structure." The warning settled, and she understood. To define was to limit, to become predictable again. The silence returned, deeper now, more intentional, and for the first time it did not feel like waiting. It felt like presence. The system inside the vehicle remained steady. No alerts, no interference, just a quiet baseline that mirrored Ethan's stillness. Outside, the presence adjusted again, not closer, not farther, but differently, its position shifting. Slightly off-center, as if seeking a new angle, a new way to interpret what it was observing. "It is trying again," Varexia said. Ethan's eyes followed the movement without turning his head. "Yes," he said. "It is looking for a pattern it understands." She leaned back slightly, not in comfort but in alignment, her posture mirroring his stillness, her breathing slowing, controlled, deliberate, the instinct to command, to dominate, to reassert her position remained, but she did not act on it, and that restraint felt unfamiliar, almost uncomfortable. "Your species," she said after a moment. "You do not respond to pressure the way others do." Ethan's answer came softly. "We do," he said. "We just choose how." The distinction lingered, subtle but profound. Outside, the distortion flickered once, a brief instability, as if the presence had encountered conflicting data, something it could not reconcile. The air pressure shifted slightly, then stabilized again, the environment adjusting in response to something unseen. Varexia felt a realization forming, not complete, not fully understood, but undeniable. This was not a confrontation of power, it was a confrontation of interpretation. "Does not know what you are," she said. Ethan shook his head slightly. "It does not know what we are," he corrected. The difference mattered, and she felt it settle into place. The vehicle remained still, 6 feet from the undefined boundary, and in that measured distance, something changed again. The presence outside did not move forward, but it did not need to. Its attention had shifted inward, focused, deliberate. Ethan's fingers moved once, lightly brushing the console, not activating anything, just grounding himself in the physical world. "Now it chooses," he said quietly. Varexia's eyes remained fixed ahead, her voice steady despite the unfamiliar weight in her chest. "Between what?" Ethan's gaze did not waver. "Between continuing to test us," he said, "or deciding we are not worth testing at all." And as the words settled, the distortion outside flickered once more, not in approach, not in retreat, but in something that felt almost like recognition. The distortion held its position, but the air around it changed again, not with pressure this time, but with intent, like a question being asked without language. And for the first time, Ethan did something different, not sudden, not aggressive, just a small shift as his hand moved from the wheel and rested open on his knee. Visible, deliberate, Senator Varexia noticed immediately, her eyes narrowing slightly, not in suspicion but in focus, "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice low but steady. Ethan did not look at her, his gaze still fixed forward. "Changing the signal," he said quietly. Outside, the presence flickered once, the edges of its form tightening, reacting to the movement not as threat but as data. Varexia felt it too, the shift in attention, sharper now, directed. "You said it learns from patterns," she said. "This is a pattern." Ethan shook his head slightly. "No," he replied. "This is a break-in one." The distinction settled between them, and for a moment she understood what he meant. Predictability was structure, but controlled unpredictability was something else entirely. The silence stretched again, but it was no longer passive. It was active, deliberate, both of them holding position, holding presence. Outside, the distortion adjusted, not closer, not farther, but angled, as if trying to align with the new variable Ethan had introduced. "It is focusing on you now," Varexia said. Ethan gave a faint nod. "Good," he answered. The word carried no arrogance, no challenge, just acceptance. Her gaze sharpened, studying him, the calm, the absence of hesitation, and something inside her shifted again, something deeper than protocol or rank. "You are drawing its attention," she said. Ethan's voice remained even. "Yes," he replied. "Because attention is a form of control, and right now it thinks it has all of it." Outside, the distortion pulsed once, a subtle ripple that moved through its outline like a recalibration, and for a fraction of a second the shape became clearer, elongated, almost humanoid, but not quite, as if the concept of form itself was being approximated. Varexia felt her breath catch, not from fear, but from the sheer impossibility of what she was witnessing. "This is beyond classification," she whispered. Ethan's fingers flexed slightly on his knee, grounding, steady. "So are we," he said. The statement hung in the air, simple, but it changed something. The presence shifted again, slower now, more deliberate, its movement no longer probing but observing in a different way, as if reassessing the entire scenario. The vehicle remained still, the engine humming quietly, a constant in a moment that had no other constants. "If it decides we are not worth testing," Varexia said carefully. "What happens next?" Ethan's eyes flicked once to the mirror, then back to the distortion. "Then it leaves," he said. She held his gaze in the reflection for a fraction of a second. "And if it decides we are," Ethan's answer came just as quietly. "Then it commits." The word carried weight, finality without force. Outside, the distortion flickered again, but this time it did not stabilize immediately, its edges shifting, uncertain, as if caught between two conclusions. Varexia felt the moment stretch, balance teetering on something unseen, and for the first time she realized that this was not just about survival. It was about definition, not of the presence, but of themselves. Ethan leaned back slightly, his posture still relaxed, his presence unwavering, and said, almost to himself, "Now we see what it chooses." And outside, the distortion slowed further, its movement no longer searching, no longer probing, but something else entirely, something that felt like hesitation turning into understanding. The hesitation outside deepened into something more structured, not retreat, not advance, but a recalibration that felt almost intentional, as if the presence had reached a threshold it could not easily cross. Ethan remained exactly as he was, one hand resting open, posture loose, gaze steady, offering nothing new and nothing reactive, and that lack of change began to define the space more than any movement could. Senator Varexia watched the distortion with sharpened focus, her mind no longer searching for dominance, but for meaning, and she saw it then. The edges of the presence were no longer pressing inward. They were stabilizing, holding position in a way that suggested not curiosity, but consideration. "It is no longer testing," she said quietly. Ethan gave a faint nod. "No," he replied. "It is evaluating." The word carried a different weight, one that shifted the moment from tension into something closer to judgment. Outside, the distortion pulsed once, slower than before, and the surrounding air adjusted with it, pressure equalizing, signals stabilizing, the environment itself responding as if the decision being formed extended beyond simple observation. Varexia felt it clearly now. The shift in attention was no longer probing for weakness. It was assessing presence, measuring not reaction, but intent. Then we are being weighed, she said. Ethan's eyes flicked once to the mirror, catching her reflection for a fraction of a second. Yes, he said, and we are not the only variables. The implication settled immediately. Whatever this presence was, it was not acting in isolation. Its decision would extend outward, beyond this moment, beyond this corridor. Silence returned again, but now it carried a strange clarity, as if both of them understood that anything they did next would define more than just survival. Virexia adjusted her posture slightly, not to assert control, but to align, her breathing steady, her gaze unwavering. And for the first time she chose stillness not because she was forced into it, but because she understood it. Your world, she said after a moment, her voice calm, measured. It shaped you to endure the unknown. Ethan did not answer immediately, but when he did, his voice carried a quiet certainty. It shaped us to decide who we are when the unknown is watching. The words settled into place, and something in the air shifted again, subtle but undeniable. Outside, the distortion thinned at its edges, not disappearing, but refining, as if it no longer needed to maintain the same level of uncertainty. The outline grew clearer for a brief instant, tall, fluid, almost reflective, then softened again, like a concept folding back into itself. Virexia felt a realization form, not fully understood but deeply certain. This was no longer about whether they would be allowed to pass, it was about what passing meant. It is changing its conclusion, she said. Ethan nodded once. Yes, he replied. Because we did not change ours. The statement lingered, simple, but absolute. The vehicle remained still, the distance unchanged, 6 feet of space that now felt less like a barrier and more like a boundary being respected. The system inside the cabin remained quiet, stable, as if it too recognized that no further input was required. If it leaves, Virexia said slowly, then it accepts us. Ethan's gaze remained forward. Not accepts, he said. Acknowledges. The distinction mattered, and she felt it settle into place. Outside, the distortion shifted once more, but this time the movement was not directed at them. It was away, subtle at first, almost imperceptible, then more defined, as if whatever watched them had reached its conclusion and no longer needed to remain. Virexia exhaled slowly, the tension in her chest easing not from relief, but from understanding. Ethan's hand moved back to the wheel, not abruptly, not urgently, just returning to position, ready but unhurried. It is leaving, she said. Ethan gave a slight nod. Yes, he replied. The corridor ahead remained dark, but no longer felt occupied, the pressure gone, the distortion fading into nothing that could be measured. For a long moment neither of them spoke, the silence no longer heavy, but complete. Then Virexia looked forward again, her voice quieter than before, carrying something new. What did it see in us? Ethan's answer came without hesitation, soft but certain. Something it could not control, he said, and the vehicle remained still for one more second before the world began to move again. The absence settled first, quiet and complete, as if the corridor itself exhaled after holding something too large to name, and the darkness ahead returned to being just darkness, empty, measurable, ordinary. Ethan did not move right away, his hands resting on the wheel, his posture unchanged, as if he was allowing the moment to finish rather than forcing it forward. Senator Virexia remained still behind him, her gaze fixed on the space where the presence had been, her mind replaying what had just occurred, not as a sequence of events, but as a shift in understanding she could not reverse. The systems inside the vehicle stabilized fully now, displays clearing, signals returning, the navigation grid reassembling into familiar patterns, but none of it felt the same. It is gone, she said quietly. Ethan gave a small nod. Yes, he replied. He waited one more second, then gently pressed the accelerator. The vehicle responding with a smooth increase in motion, rolling forward past the point where the boundary had been, crossing it without resistance, without consequence. The tires moved over the same surface, the air flowed the same way, but the space felt different, as if something unseen had marked it, and then withdrawn. Varexia leaned back slowly, her posture no longer rigid, no longer performative, just present, and that presence carried weight she had not felt before. You knew it would leave, she said after a moment. Ethan shook his head slightly, eyes on the road. No, he said. I knew it would decide. She watched him in silence, studying the calm in his voice, the absence of relief, the lack of triumph, and something in her perspective shifted. Again, you did not try to overpower it, she said. Ethan's hands adjusted slightly on the wheel, guiding the vehicle back toward the main grid, the city lights growing brighter ahead. That was never an option, he replied. Then you did not try to escape, she continued. Ethan's answer came just as simply. That was not the point. The words settled, and she understood them differently now, not as limitation, but as choice. The skyline opened up in front of them, familiar structures rising into view, the hum of the city returning, traffic signals blinking in steady rhythm. Everything exactly as it had been before, and yet nothing felt unchanged. Varexia's gaze moved from the window to the reflection in the glass, catching Ethan's eyes for a brief moment, and she saw it clearly now, not strength in the way she had defined it, not authority, not dominance, but something quieter, something that did not require recognition to exist. What are you? She asked, her voice no longer edged with superiority, but with something closer to curiosity. Ethan did not answer right away, his focus on the road, the steady motion, the return to normal patterns. After a moment, he spoke, his voice low, even, unchanged, human, he said. The simplicity of it carried more weight than any title she had ever heard. The vehicle merged back into the main flow of traffic, other vehicles passing, signals updating, the world continuing as if nothing extraordinary had happened, and for a moment, she wondered how many of those around them would ever understand what had just been avoided, or what had just been acknowledged. Her hand moved slightly, resting against the armrest where earlier she had leaned forward with command, and she noticed the difference, the absence of that impulse. Back there, she said slowly. It did not fear you. Ethan's eyes remained forward. No, he replied. She considered that, then added. It respected you. Ethan's expression did not change, but his voice carried a faint, almost imperceptible shift. It recognized us, he said. The distinction settled into silence, and she felt it echo deeper than anything else that had been said. The city lights reflected across her skin again, but they no longer felt like symbols of status, just light, just movement, just part of a larger system she did not fully control. She looked forward, watching the road, the steady progression, and for the first time she did not see the human in front of her as beneath her, or even equal in the way she had defined equality, but as something else entirely. Ethan guided the vehicle smoothly through the final turn, the destination approaching in quiet certainty, and neither of them spoke again. Outside, the rain began once more, soft against the glass, ordinary, predictable, and inside the vehicle, the silence remained, no longer heavy, no longer uncertain, but understood, and somewhere beyond the city, beyond the sensors, beyond anything that could be measured, something had made a decision, and for now, it had chosen to let them pass.